Hey listeners, it's AZ. Welcome back to episode 60 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. And before I introduce today's guest, I wanted to give a shout out and thank you to episode sponsor Tara Cornett from Flame Decon. As you probably know, cancer is something that is impacting our firefighters greatly. And one of the ways that we can help bolster our chances of not getting cancer is to meticulously and carefully decon our bodies after fire events. So go over, check out Tara's charcoal-based products at flamedecon.com. So, episode 60. Today I sat down with my friend Tara Soprano. Tara is an athletic trainer who formerly worked in orthopedics, and then she worked in somewhat of a commercial gym situation where she was the strength and conditioning coach in charge of patients or clients that had orthopedic challenges. Recently, she took a new position with the Army's H2F, the Holistic Health and Fitness Program, as a recruiter. And so Tara and I sat down and we talked a lot about firefighter injury mitigation and health and wellness and all of the things. And I just also wanted to point out too, Tara's husband is a firefighter. He also thinks she's not funny. Nick, I'm here to tell you, Tara is very funny. Listeners, thanks for joining me. And if you want to support the podcast, go over to wherever you listen to podcasts, give it a rating, and share it with someone that you know. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Listeners, hey, it's AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, and today I am here with my friend, Tara. Sing the song, Soprano. Say hello to the listeners.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here.
And as I told Tara via email earlier this week, every time for some reason, when I think of Tara, I think of Janet Jackson. There's no reason, there's no logical reason. And then that song, I'm sorry, Miss Jackson, that comes into my head. And then I want to call you Ms. Soprano. So
that works for me.
Okay, well, good, because here we are. Tara, I'm going to get started first off with the get to know you questions. And the first one is, who is Tara Soprano?
I mean, excellent question. I think this is, and I know this is meant to be introductory, but to me, I would have answered this question so differently 5 years ago. I would have come out with like what my job title is, because that was so important. Now I think when you ask me who I am, depends on who you're talking to. I'm a lot of things, right? Like I am I'm a really great friend. I think I'm an exceptional wife. I mean, I think my husband hit the lottery, by the way. Obviously, a little bit biased. I think I'm a great coworker. I'm an athletic trainer by background. I'm someone who really loves animals. I really have been in the fitness industry and the fitness space and sports medicine my entire career, but really majority of my life. So I think I'm a lot of things. I hope that I'm someone who can change your mind on fitness and movement as medicine, and that you don't have to live in pain, and what that really means for the longevity of your life.
Such a great answer, and so in line with so many of the other guests that I've had on, so that's really cool. We're sending a consistent message. I love it.
I love that.
All right, lady. Second, really tough question. What sets your soul on fire?
I think I'm most passionate about getting people to realize their potential, whether that's in their career, in their physical body, in their movement. And again, like I think I would have answered this so differently 5 years ago, but I think about the quote, like, leave it better than you found it. And whether that's in a relationship, in a career, in like a physical activity, progress is progress, 1% every day. It doesn't have to be this huge sweeping change in your life. Just leave it better than you found it.
It's pretty good answer. And we could probably just wrap up the podcast here, but we have a few more minutes to go. We have a few more minutes to go. How are you changing the world?
I think, and I thought about this, is like the world itself. I think one of the things I've done really well in the past, and I keep saying like 5 years because I think this was just like a really big change in my life and like career, is to have a little bit more patience and a little bit more grace in all things. I'm super reactive by nature, which I always thought made me great. I'm funny, I'm witty, I can think on my feet. My husband does not think I'm funny, which is a character flaw for him, but I am. I'm actually very funny.
I think you're hilarious if it helps.
Thank you. I knew it. I knew I would have one subscriber. I also, being that I worked in sports medicine, had to think on my feet and had to be ready for anything. And I always thought that's what made me great. And I'm realizing now, as I'm now like mid-30s, that it's actually that tactical pause after something happens that's so much more important. You have to have the whole picture. You have to give yourself and other people a little bit of grace. And I think if I can help people do that in their careers, in their lives, the world would be a different place.
So basically what I'm hearing from you is that it's kind of like the Viktor Frankl thing. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. Yeah. I think you said a space. Yeah. And in that space, you get to choose.
Correct.
I love that. So Tara, it's always interesting to me. I always try to tell the listeners just a tiny bit of background about how I met the person, because every single person I've had on my podcast is a friend or a close acquaintance. And so I remember specifically, it was just under a year ago, I was doing a presentation. I did a presentation in Lamont, and then I did a presentation in Downers Grove. And I had posted just a little photo about the presentation slide, and I got a message from you on Instagram, and you're like, hi, I'm Tara. I'm local. You want to talk? And I was like, absolutely. But I remember specifically at that time, you were working on a contract with O2X. So tell us about, as an athletic trainer, what did you do for O2X?
So for O2X, I was part of like their workshop team. So I would go out to different like fire departments, military bases, and I did an injury prevention workshop. So I did a half day classroom and then a half day like hands-on session where I would actually take the participants through some ideas between like warm up, cool down, strength exercises that would help prevent injuries in the tactical space. So I started that in 2019. And did that really until recently. And it's not that I don't necessarily work for them anymore. It's just that I've switched roles in my full-time job and just don't really have the availability to do that. But during that time, I really fell in love with working with fire, police, military in the tactical space. I saw it as just such an underutilized group who really need help. And I don't mean that to be mean. I mean that as like, we owe it to these people to have the resources that they need to be successful. And I remember in 2019, the way like they were doing, O2X was doing it at the time, they flew me out to basically see a workshop and like, see, this is what I would be doing and presenting. And it was like in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I cannot even remember what Air Force base it was. And I remember on the way home being like, this is it. Like, this is what I should be doing. I know I'm supposed to be here, and I know I need to continue doing this. And I did probably, last year I was doing like 2 workshops a month, which doesn't sound like a lot. But that means travel day. So I was on a plane like every other week.
Lord have mercy. That's a lot of travel.
It is. It was fun though. Like I got to interact with so many different people, and so many different types of departments. Again, like fire, police, military. I even did a spouses course. That was one of the most, rewarding for me. That was so fun.
I love that. And there are more resources coming around for spouses, which I think is amazing. And I think, you know what, we talked about how lucky your husband is. We talked about how he should think that you're funny, but what we forgot to mention was his career. So tell us about your husband.
Yeah. And to be honest, I don't think my husband's funny, and we have agreed that we could just have other people think that we're funny.
Okay, good.
It's funny in itself. Like, I do not think that he's funny at all. I do not laugh at his jokes. I am thankful when other people do, so I don't feel pressure. Well, and I just don't laugh. I don't care. But my husband is a full-time firefighter, so I do feel also like personally a little bit responsible for the health and safety of course, him and his department, but overall firefighters in general. I think that I bring this unique perspective just because I am in this field, and then I have this other connection that's very personal. And I feel like I owe it to not just the service industry, but also the other spouses and family members, like, to keep these people safe.
Well, and if you don't mind sharing, you were kind of giving me I guess it would be an analogy before we got on the actual recording of sort of how you used to kick off your workshops. Can you sort of recreate that for the listeners? Because it was pretty powerful, actually.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that makes me a little bit different is that I am a spouse. And so I feel that firsthand responsibility. And part of the, if you wanted to go into the psychology of the people who become first responders, super interesting. They won't always do something for themselves, but they do understand about being part of a community and being part of a team. And part of that, and what I used to say was, maybe you won't do it for yourself, but why don't you do it for me? Because I'm the person that you leave at home every day, whether that's your spouse, a family member, a close friend. You're leaving those people at home. And if you aren't taking your health and wellness as a priority, like, it's almost an insult to me. Like, I care about you. I want you to come home. I want you to move safely. I want you to be able to do this job for as long as you want to do it. But don't forget about yourself in that process. And if you won't do it for yourself, then do it for me.
Well, absolutely. And you more or less say goodbye to your spouse because they're on 24/48s as well, correct?
Yes, they're on 24/48s.
Okay. And so you say goodbye to your husband, and basically he's not coming home for a whole day. And that's that's a sacrifice a little bit, as,
For sure.
In a relationship. And so I kind of I absolutely see what you're saying. If he can't do it for himself, at least do it for you, who's the one at home. That makes a lot of sense. Did that message resonate with people?
Yeah. So one of the first workshops that I kind of said that, I was almost like, you ever have that like vulnerability hangover? You're like, I told all these people something. They don't even know me. But the lead instructor came up to me later and he said, that was excellent. He was like, keep telling your story. He's like, people will connect with that. He's like, that was very memorable. And he's like, please keep sharing that. And I remember that. And so I did. And people came up to me and kind of, I feel like they also trusted me a little bit more, because that they were like, okay, you know what I do. You know what it's like for me to be home and not home. You understand kind of the culture of what the fire service is.
Oh my gosh, that is so important. And it's the biggest barrier for, you can be the best practitioner out there, the number one person in the world. But if you cannot get your head wrapped around the culture, you are going to struggle greatly.
And I think I totally agree with you. And I think one of the things that I ended up like talking about that I didn't even realize when I was teaching the spouses course is like, there were so many things I wish I would have known about like being a first responder spouse, that were like kind of honestly a tough learning curve. I didn't grow up with any of like my family or even friends like doing even shift work. So like I did not get it. So there was like a couple of nuances, especially I moved here for my husband. So I didn't have any friends or family in the area. So like he was my sole person. So I remember like him getting off shift. They work 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. So the day that he's supposed to get off at 7:35, I'm like staring at our front door. I'm like, where is he? And like at 7:45, I'm like, okay, like, where are you? Like, we have to start our day. And he was like, oh, I don't come home right away. I'm like, oh my God, I've never lingered at a job. Like, I want to leave. And he was like, no, that's like my way to decompress. Like, I want to see the guys. We have a cup of coffee. We talk about the day. We talk about this. And I was just like, that's so weird. But it's not weird. It's not weird to have a routine that helps you de-stress. It's not weird to need to decompress after a particularly hard shift at whatever type of job you have. This was like a little bit, maybe a lack of maturity on my part. I was like, I just didn't know. And now I have adjusted my expectations and schedules accordingly.
Right. And now you're going for runs with your pitties and you're not waiting for him anymore. You got stuff to do.
No, I do. I do not wait. I don't even wait to make coffee. Like that was like I thought that we were going to have like breakfast and coffee together. And now I'm like, nope, I'm up. I got things to do. But yeah, I think there has been a bunch of things like that. Or it's like if they ran calls all night and we had plans for Sunday morning, well, now they have to be adjusted. It is the way it is. Or I have to say, hey, is 4 hours enough time for you to get some sleep? Or like, should I adjust the plans more? Or like, hey, this used to happen all the time. Like, hey, I got mandatory and we had plans.
Oh,
okay. Well, being upset, it happens. Yeah. It happens all the time. So, adjust your expectations, have a contingency plan, I guess is my other, but these were things that I just like wasn't necessarily prepared for. Or like the emotional part of like, some of this work is really hard and could be traumatic. And sometimes, people of all services deal with that in different ways. My way is to not speak about work the second it ends. And that is not how my husband operates. He would like to rehash his entire day with me. I don't particularly love that. But I will do it because if that's like what he needs, then I will attentively listen as best I can.
You and I are very similar. When that clock strikes 7 a.m., sometimes even before, I am out of there and I am not. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not checking like the Northern Illinois Fireground, whatever photos, Facebook to see if my department's on a job. Like when I'm there, I am there. And when I'm gone, I'm real gone. For sure.
I don't want to like even this was super common when I worked in orthopedics too, where like difficult patients or difficult cases, as soon as they were over, did not want to speak about it again. It's over. I do not want to have to relive this.
Girl, we have so much in common.
I know.
Well, so I've had a couple other athletic trainers on the podcast, and although they've discussed what is an athletic trainer, what do they do, I can't make the assumption that every listener has listened to every episode. So I want to just kind of briefly delve into your scope of practice and sort of what types of things can you be useful for in terms of the tactical population?
Yeah, great question. I never thought that I, as an athletic trainer, would work in a tactical population. So athletic training is a very versatile background, but most people know us for our work in like the sports medicine world. But athletic trainers are well-versed in the recognition, I can't really use the word diagnosis, but we'll say the recognition of musculoskeletal injuries, but also the treatment of such, prevention of such, and rehabilitation. So really a broad scope. And we're seeing athletic trainers just be utilized in so many different areas now. So traditionally, athletic trainers are thought of in high school, collegiate, and professional sports. But now we've really done a great job, I think, of stepping out of that and looking at the active population, not just as traditional athletes, but people who have a physically demanding job, for instance, like fire, police, and military. So athletic trainers are certainly utilized in the tactical space when it comes to exactly what I spoke about, the prevention of injuries, the rehabilitation, and recognition of injuries as well. So that's super exciting, especially as the field grows. And again, like I just think this is a really underserved population.
And I always try to describe it as this is a high impact job, which maybe not the best description, but we are sitting at a desk. I can't say we aren't. We are sitting at a desk, but we go from sitting at a desk to 100 miles an hour on a fire scene in 5 minutes. And so let's kind of go through some of the common injuries. Let's keep it to fire for right now. I know we're gonna get to the military, but let's keep it to fire. What are some of the common injuries you see, and maybe some potential ways we can address those before they even become a problem?
Yeah. So I think the common injuries are usually kind of in those major joints. So definitely a lot of shoulder. I will throw back in there, like a low back, hip and knee. Those would be like the major areas of concern, and for good reason, right? Like we have to generate force from those major joints. And a kind of echoing what you said, a lot of times you are going from 0 to 100, meaning your body may not be able to take on that acute stress. So those are always my like major areas of target when we're talking about injury prevention. So like shoulder, low back. And when I say low back, I'm really thinking about addressing the core as a whole, hip, knee. And when we talk about injury prevention, I always say that like injury prevention exercises aren't necessarily sexy and like Instagrammable. Doing your hip cars is maybe not something that you wanted to put on Instagram. Just like
Although
not as fun.
I have put some hip cars on Instagram.
Hey, you know what? They're important, and people need instructional videos on hip cars. So when I think about injury prevention, I think about a couple of things. One, you always need to, like, from a rehabilitation standpoint, and this is always where my mind goes because this is my background, is like, how do we make it better? And then you can just progress from there. So you always restore the range of motion first. You can't add load if you don't have the proper range of motion. So in any instance, I would always start with a mobility that takes the joint through its full range of motion. So I would start with some mobility drills. And there are drills that I personally do every day that could be utilized like pretty universally. And I'm going to hit all of those major joints. So I'm going to take my spine through its range of motion, shoulders, hip, knee. I am going to also like throw my ankles in there just because it's super easy to actually hit the whole body with just a couple of movements. So those would be my areas of concern, and what I would address first would be mobility. Then I would move on to activation. So when I say activation, I mean I'm just priming my body to take on stress. I'm starting to maybe add a little bit of load, or I'm going to move in a way that's going to challenge my muscles to get them, quote, activated. It's not like your muscles are deactivated at any point. We are just doing a little bit more movement that's focused on a particular area. So I mentioned the spine and working on your core. I would do something that addresses my core in a way that's intentional, that I'm focusing on kind of bracing my core or moving with while bracing my core. So in my mind, I'm thinking about like a dead bug position. So I'm moving my arms and limbs and my arms and legs through space while maintaining a braced core position and also focusing on my breathing. So that's something that I would do next. And then again, I would do a couple more exercises that would address big muscles. So my glutes, my quads, my hamstrings, my chest, and maybe some back exercises as well. All of these things can be done in less than 10 minutes.
And I did not want to interrupt you, but I feel very, very affirmed, I think is going to be the word, although it's not the exact word I want, but I am a huge fan of the cars. But I also think that a vast majority of the people listening right now are saying, what in the hell are Tara and Annette talking about? Tell us about cars.
Yeah, so cars, just think about a car as taking the joint through its range of motion. So you're basically making, like if we're talking about hip cars, you're on hands and knees on all fours, and you're taking your hip through its entire range of motion. You're making a big circle with your hip. You've probably seen these as like a fire hydrant before, and just think about completing the circle. So the way I used to teach a hip car would be if you were on all fours, you'd have your wrists underneath your shoulders and your knees underneath your hips. You could probably all visualize what that looks like. From there, you would make sure that you have your core engaged, meaning pull your belly button towards your spine. Doesn't mean suck in your stomach, just means like get ready to have someone like hit you in the stomach. How would you brace yourself? How would you like prepare? From there, think about you have a marker attached to your kneecap, and I want you to try to draw as big a circle as possible. So you're taking that hip. I'm doing it. I know you guys can't see me. Through its range of motion. You're just making a big circle. And what we're doing is we're just preparing the joint by taking it through its natural range of motion.
And so the acronym CAR stands for Controlled Articular Rotation. And just like Tara said, it's your biggest pain-free range of motion. And there's more
Totally.
to this system, the functional range conditioning. But
Oh,
I'm gonna actually shout out Dr. Jamie Mraz. She is a military PT. I will link her. I will link her Instagram account in the show notes. She does almost daily CARS posts on Instagram. So
Excellent.
shout out Dr. Jamie. She makes
You'll
CARS
have great
sexy.
visuals.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I'm sure that she does.
she makes it sexy. Okay, so again, the main issues with firefighters are those injuries to the, like you said, the shoulder, the low back, hip, knee. Yes, amen. And the thing that I always like to remind the firefighters about is that many of our injuries come from locking down joints that should be moving freely, but don't move freely with our PPE. And so we can't just take that for granted. We can't just go, I'm going to put on my gear and everything's going to be fine. You really need to work on your joint range of motion. Drop the mic.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like, you can't properly load a joint that doesn't move well and expect to have a great outcome.
Oh my gosh. Say it again.
No.
Say it again.
So you can't properly load a joint that doesn't move well. So think about, like, if someone was only able to partially lift their arm, you would never hand them a weight and then ask them to do that under load. You're not going to have a good outcome. You're going to increase their pain. You could potentially do harm. That's why you have to move through the range of motion first.
So this is the reason, my friends, that say barbell snatches for time may not be your best training modality when you don't own that range of motion at your shoulder joint.
Correct.
We need
you always have to think, like, the body doesn't know. You need to think. Actually, just stop there. You just need to think. You just need to think. That's it.
Just need to think. Okay, I love this conversation. It's so awesome. I want to transition a little bit because when I met you, you were also working at a local, is it like a healthcare based gym? Is that what it was?
I would call Mar a performance gym. I think I was so lucky to be able to work there. I have to be honest. I had such great coworkers and mentors. The community is excellent. I think they do an excellent job of meeting, like, science and, like, the implementation of, like, the programming is so smart. And I know that average people probably don't know the ins and outs of programming, and they don't have to, and that's totally great. Their programming is so smart. I mean, I learned so much. I was, again, so lucky to be able to work there. And I was there for just over, I think, like 18 months. But yeah, that's where we met. I was doing a lot of the kind of more complicated orthopedic people who just, like, needed a little bit more attention, and they really needed someone who had a kind of orthopedic background. There would be people who would walk into, like, a regular facility, not necessarily mine, and people would be like, we can't train you, or like, oh, I don't know. I felt very lucky to work with them. And it was super impactful for me, especially just, like, for having that athletic training background, knowing when to be able to kind of progress someone, what like contraindications after surgery might be. So those were a lot of my people.
So I knew how much you were excited about that job and loved that job. So it really surprised me when you left, but you left for such another cool opportunity. So tell the listeners about what you're doing now.
So I've heard this before, and I do think it's true, to leave before you're ready. And I definitely felt that way when I left MAR. I don't know that I was ready. Even when I left orthopedics, I don't know that I was ready. And I think in some points, you'll probably never be ready for a big life change. I did get an opportunity to work with the Army's wellness program, H2F, which stands for Holistic Health and Fitness. And I came on kind of on the project management side as a recruiter. And I get a lot of questions from both athletic trainers and from, honestly, just people, is like, why would you do this? Why would you go from a job that you really loved, and I did love it. And I have only the most respect for the people that work at MAR, and I still actually great friends with all of them. Why would you leave this job that you love, that you are good at? What's the reasoning? And I think a couple of things. This was an opportunity that I had been kind of waiting for. I've wanted to kind of get in with H2F for a long time. I don't particularly live near a facility, an Army installation that has an H2F resource, and I can't relocate. I've been fortunate enough to be offered many jobs across the time I've lived in Illinois, across many states in the country. I've obviously turned down all of them because I'm committed to living here. We're committed to my husband, working where he works. So I thought, well, maybe one day I'll be able to work for this really cool opportunity with training Army soldiers and bettering their lives and longevity, all of the things that really excited me about working in the tactical space. And I got a cold message. I was referred by a friend for a position, and they were like, we just don't know if you're going to be interested in this. And I ended up taking the role because I saw this as an opportunity, one, to be a specialist that recruits other specialists. If you've ever been recruited for a position, you're usually talking to someone who isn't necessarily well-versed in the subject field. And they realized that they needed someone who could speak the language and someone that could actually relate to the specialist. So I help hire the strength and conditioning specialist and the cognitive performance specialist. So I'm well-versed in what it takes to do the strength and conditioning job. I wasn't as well-versed in the cognitive space, but I've learned so much from the people who have been able to help me with that and understand what it is as the field, which is so interesting. And just the people that are on staff right now have been really super helpful. So I saw this as a way to, one, give back to like the Army itself in finding specialists who could really impact the program. And then secondly, I found a really rewarding opportunity in that I could help advance people's careers. And I think that's part of kind of what I mentioned at the top of the podcast is I'm in a place where I want to help people. And that doesn't mean just physically. I get to help people advance their career, which I also find really rewarding.
And you said something interesting before we started recording, which was you kind of consider H2F, which is holistic health and fitness, in case we didn't define that. The H2F program is holistic health and fitness, as almost a public health initiative. So tell me more about why you said that.
Yeah, I do. And I do talk a lot about that when I'm interviewing and talking like amongst our program management team. And I think about H2F like a public health initiative because our enlisted soldiers come from our general population. If you looked at the average health of an American, it's not stellar. We're faced with a lot of challenges in this country, and a lot of that has to do with our sedentary lifestyle. Our food, we have access to so much that's so processed, and it is challenging, I think, to make smart nutrition choices. And some of that is just pure information, which I can go into in a second. The second part of that is our mental health. We're all faced with all kinds of stress, and we don't all have the resources in order to deal with that or have outlets for that or have a safe space to communicate what we're feeling. We're not really set up for success in that area. And I think about, the fire service and other first responders in the same way. It's like, these are average, everyday Americans. They are faced with the same challenges that the general population is. And now we're asking them to do a very physical and mentally challenging job with no resources. Like, that is not a way to set people up for success. So if you took a huge step back from the program, we're helping the lives of these soldiers well beyond their military career. And I think that's what's really important is like the H2F program is mission focused. We are focused on their military career, but these are people first, right? They're soldiers second. We have to help them and see them as people before we can see them as soldiers. And I think that's why the program is impactful. We are going to help them in their military career and make sure that they stay safe and that they're making the most, the smartest decisions they can when it comes to their sleep, their stress, their nutrition. We have experts in all of those areas who help guide their training and give them the tools that they can then practice and bring home with them. But we also want them to use these skills well beyond their military career.
And I feel like we're sharing a brain right now, because I say all the time, the fire service is hired from the general population, and then we sleep deprive them and traumatize them and give them no resources.
Correct.
All right. I don't want to get too far off track. I'm going to hopefully remember to circle back to this, but tell me, you mentioned a lot of the H2F is education based.
Yeah.
Tell me what that looks like.
Yeah. So our coaches do a good amount of education for the soldiers and for Army leadership. And we know that in any program, right, like you have to educate your client, whoever that might be, in order to empower them. I used to do that even in my personal training sessions. I was never worried when someone asked, why are we doing it this way? To me, that was an opportunity to teach them. Oh, I didn't know you didn't know that. Let me explain it. Hey, I think that we're going to do it this way because this is the outcome I'm targeting. And so, when we talk especially about like the lifestyle type habits of sleep, nutrition, and nutrition for performance, right? Like we're not just talking about general nutrition, whether that's military or fire, or police, first responder, athletes, you are fueling your body for a physical performance. And it's not necessarily a gold medal. It's to sustain that work for a set period of time that keeps you safe. So these are things that most people don't, again, general population do not know how to fuel for performance or what proper sleep looks like. It's not scrolling on your phone before you close your eyes for 4.5 hours. That's not it.
That's not it.
That's not it.
So the H2F program has had some struggles with implementation. It's very big. For sure. It's a very big program. And we would expect that to happen, much like we would expect it to happen in anything, like in any business. Implementing a huge new program is a struggle bus. But I want to hear from you. How do you think that we can take the principles of H2F, a government program, and apply it to the fire service? What model do you think might work?
Yeah, good question. And I always talk about the H2F model as not being very groundbreaking. What's groundbreaking is that the military is doing it in a large scale. And so I think about the structure, the way, honestly, collegiate and high-level athletics has done for a long period of time. You address the pillars of human performance that are necessary for your group. And I think the basics would be strength and conditioning, some type of mental performance, and that doesn't have to be, it could be a lot of things, but we'll call it just mental performance, some type of stress management. That could go with mental performance, I think, and nutrition, and either injury prevention with strength and conditioning or some type of rehabilitation when injuries happen. We know that strength and conditioning is injury prevention, right? A well-rounded program will help you reduce the risk of injury. But injuries are not 100% preventable. Someone steps off a curb, things happen, our body is only so resilient. Injuries will happen. So we will need an entity to address that when that happens. I think those are the basics. I think where sometimes implementation goes wrong is the person who knows the most in the room ends up being the specialist. So the person who went to the 40-hour-a-week class on nutrition is now the nutritionist. Probably not the best solution. Is it the least worst solution? Yeah, that doesn't make it the best one.
I recently spent a couple days in South Denver at South Metro Fire. Now, granted, it is a large agency, but girl, they have it all. They have their medical doctor in the building, physical therapists, athletic trainers, strength and conditioning, different types of mental performance specialist, dietitian. They have it all. Now, and that's just normal for them.
Yes.
How do we take that model to departments that are not as big as South Metro and make it work? I have an idea, but no one's listening. I want to hear your idea.
So my initial idea is start with your lowest hanging fruit. What is going to make the difference in your department? And if I had to take a wild guess, and this is kind of where I thought my husband's department would start, is initially, this is at least 5 years ago, he was kind of commenting how many workman's comp injuries they have. And I did like some very quick calculation. I think one of the things I did very well in orthopedics is I understood the business of healthcare. And even though people don't want to say it, healthcare is a business. And if you have to run it like a business, it is what it is. So I did some like quick calculations and I said, what if I said I could save this department township $1 million? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, you need to have an on-site specialist, even if it was part-time, to help monitor the small things before they become big things. And of course, in my mind, because I'm biased, this would have been an athletic trainer. It would have been someone who could help address issues before they become real issues. So think about some type of movement screen, some types of need analysis, and then implementation from there. Of course, I'm going to start with kind of the strength and conditioning injury prevention side. I'm going to start with the physical side because that's my area of expertise. But you could start with nutrition. You could start with sleep, but you have to start somewhere. I think it could be part-time. I think having the on-site resource doesn't have to be in person. Now I'm thinking, could it be? I just think the connection is there.
It's better. On-site's better.
It's better. That's what I think. I think it's better. I think we're also in a world where everything could be digital, but the connection in person is what's memorable.
So I am not biased. I am a strength and conditioning coach and a credentialed nutritionist. And I still say, if you only can hire one person, it should be an athletic trainer. So, Okay, so you want to hear my idea?
I do.
Okay. In Illinois, we have MABUS divisions. And those MABUS divisions can encompass just a few departments. I think my MABUS division is Downers Grove, Lisle Woodridge, and Naperville. Maybe
it's a pretty big departments.
Yeah, I'm not great with knowing exactly who's in my MABUS division. And then there's MABUS divisions that have a lot of small departments. But I think that much like there's a MABUS TRT truck with all the assets on it, I think there should be a MABUS asset in terms of human performance. So maybe our 6 departments or 5, whatever it is, because I'm so terrible, share one asset and we start there.
I think that's a great idea. Is Beaver Fit listening to us right now? Could they provide us with some gym in a box that would be mobile?
I don't know. Beaver Fit, I'm looking for a sponsor. Let us know. Tara and I
Beaver
will
Fit,
make it happen.
We're available.
That's Jason Clark, right? Is that Jason Clark?
I don't know. I see them all about, and a lot of H2F facilities are outfitted primarily with Beaver Fit.
I think.
But hey, Sorinex, if you're listening, I'll take that too.
Or Rogue. I actually know people at Sorinex, so we'll make this happen. I just think that it's worth each department, even if 100%. They're really small. I think if you have 50 people, I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. If you have 50 people, you should have 51, and that 51st person should be your human performance professional full-time. I think that there's enough margin there to save enough money to pay that professional. And if you're at 20 and 25 people, I still think you need someone part-time.
I agree with you. I also, and I think what people listening, and I'll just use my husband as an example, will say it comes down to dollars. And so then make it about dollars. And that was always my argument, is like, you're going to have to spend a little to save a lot. So what's it worth?
Oh, it's like when you go to Kohl's. You spend a little and they basically give you back money.
In Kohl's cash, though.
In Kohl's cash, Right.
One of my favorite pastimes is to annoy people who love cryptocurrency. And my reply is like, oh, like Cole's Cash? It makes them so angry. Try it at your next party. It's very fun.
Okay. I don't go to parties, but I'll try it out anyway.
Try it on your next group text message.
What is your husband's name again, Tara?
Nick.
Nick. She's funny. I don't care what you say. She's funny.
It's so true. It's so true.
She's funny.
The funniest part is that, like, people will think, they're like, oh, Nick, he's so goofy. He's so funny. And I'm like, who? My husband? Oh, I don't think so. Like, we don't even have like the same, even like TV shows. Like, we can find something to watch, but the things that or like podcasts, like, we just have very different tastes. We're actually like, we have a good amount of things that we do separately and like have separate interests. And that was like a very good thing that we have always done. He even like music. He was like, oh, I think I could get you like to kind of like some of the music I like. And I said, oh, is there an opt out? Because I'm not interested. He's like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, I think that you should just like go to concerts with your friends. I think this should be a friend thing that I'm not involved with at all.
Yes. Agree. I agree.
Yeah.
All right, Tara, we are getting to the part of the podcast where I always give you, it's like a choose your own adventure. You get to do one of two things. The first one, did I mess up and not go down a rabbit hole we should have gone down? Let's go down it. Or number two, is there some like meaty little nugget or pearl of wisdom that you would like to leave the podcast listeners with?
Ooh, good question. I think maybe something that meets in the middle of those two things is, in any profession, in any like path you take, your health is going to be your greatest asset. And if you have a physically and mentally demanding job, it's a non-negotiable. And it's not, I don't feel so bad. It's how good could you feel? And I think there's a difference there. You don't have to be in pain all the time. You don't have to have this, like, I want to call it like a badge of honor of like so many injuries, so many surgeries. You can take care of yourself. There are resources for that. And I think you owe it to yourself for the longevity of your life, and not just your career, and for the people around you, to keep yourself healthy and moving well. And there are resources out there. And I feel like, you have such a great community that, like, if people are listening or truly like, hey, I think you're lying, I have no idea where to turn, then like tag both of us. Like, we'll help you.
Indeed, we will. That was a really good nugget.
Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's one of my favorite parts of the podcast. I always ask about the puppy situation. Tell me about it's dogs, right?
Yes.
Tell me about dogs.
So I have 2 rescue pit bulls who, I mean, they're the best. They're the best. I love them so much. We rescued both of them, not at the same time. They both just turned 6. I have a blue pit and a brindle pit, and they are Brutus and Caesar. I do not have any children, so these are my babies. I am much more of a dog person than a kid person. I'm sure everyone's kids are great. I'm just not interested. I love animals. We will, right now it's man-on-man defense, and we're kind of toying with the idea of, do we add a third at some point? We're talking about, we have fostered dogs before. That was tough. Letting them go is really challenging. We're kind of debating whether we're going to be ready for that again. But I think if we found a third that was a good fit for our 2, then we would. I have definitely a warm place in my heart just for helping animals. And I think more than that, I'm so appreciative of like the rescues and the fosters that our dogs had. And I would love to be able to provide that for other animals and for other people who like want to have a pet. It's so comforting to come home to an animal. They love you. Like, no matter what, they love you.
That is true. And I'm with you on the kids thing. Like, just show me your dogs. Let me see the dogs.
I'm sure everyone's kids are great. I'm just not super interested. In the pictures, sure. But like having my own children, no. I like my dogs.
All right. We are kindred spirits. That is for sure.
For sure.
All right. Ms. Soprano, if a listener wanted to reach out, to you after the podcast, what would be the best way?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, and it's my first and last name. Super easy to find. I have a public profile. I'm not hiding any of the pictures of my lattes or my dogs. My life is not super exciting. Or my running, or how sweaty of a human I am. That's all on there.
That's what.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm gonna put
your Instagram contact in the show notes. But people, this is your trigger warning. When it gets hot in Illinois, Tara likes to run. And then after that, she likes to wring out her shirt and her hair. And it is gross.
It is gross. I'm well adapted. I'm well acclimatized. The sooner you start sweating, it just means you're that much fit. You're more fit because your body is, heating up and it's cooling itself efficiently. And then for professional, I do a lot on LinkedIn. If people have questions about H2F, about joining, about where, we are actively looking for strength and conditioning coaches and human and cognitive performance coaches. If you have questions or want to talk about it, good, bad. For those who are on I'm on LinkedIn, again, first and last name, super easy to find. I'm sure you're in it, and there's a tactical group, an NSCA tactical group on Facebook.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm in there as well. I do post some of our jobs, and listen, there's good and bad to everything. And I don't shy away from either negative comments or critiques of the H2F program. We're all works in progress, as is H2F. So I don't shy away from questions or, maybe less than stellar comments about anything. I'm happy to discuss it. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to talk about the opportunity with anyone. I talk to students all the time, people who are just interested in learning more. I'm happy to have a conversation.
She actually talked to me because she posted something with an H2F position in good weather. So I was very interested.
Yes, Louisiana. Could be 75 on Christmas Day. If that's for you, come on. I got a spot for you.
How's the humidity, though? I have frizzy hair.
I do think it's humid there. I also have a position in El Paso, Texas, dry heat. Desert.
Ooh, and pension-friendly state. More to follow. We'll talk.
Very, very low cost of living. Actually, in the top 10 for where your money goes the furthest. This has nothing to do with H2F. I actually read this on a different article. But El Paso was in the top 10 for where your money goes the furthest in the continental U.S.
This has been a very, very enlightening conversation. I almost said conference. Yeah. What's wrong with me? A very, very enlightening conversation.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, Tara, this has been fabulous. It has been so fun talking to you. And I think with that, we can probably drop the mic and say that Tara and AZ are officially out.